So we've just started recording. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this really interesting webinar. I'm looking at the state of the arts in the new economy or in the economy. In a moment, I will hand over to your MC for the night, our wonderful coordinator of the NENA Arts and Culture Hub, Katherine Van Wilkenberg. But before I do that, two bits of housekeeping about our webinar. But before I do that, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and future of the Yagara and Turrbal peoples on whose land I live, work and play. I'm here in North Brisbane and it's the traditional lands of the Turrbal peoples. But of course, the Yagara Turrbal peoples lived across the Brisbane area and continue today to care for country and be amazing and inspirational in terms of how they look after kin and look after country. I would also like to acknowledge the ongoing legacy of colonisation in all of the organisations that NENA and NENA is connected to. We'd like to prioritise an acknowledgement of country, but also an acknowledgement of the ongoing legacy of colonisation. And one of NENA's founding or core principles is about working in solidarity across all cultures, but particularly in support of the First Nations peoples of Australia. The other thing I would like to do just briefly, and there are a few more people coming in, so that's all good. I'd like to give some folks a few reminders about some exciting things happening within the New Economy Network at the moment. Next week, for example, we have our fabulous annual conference, which for the first time ever, thanks to our good friend COVID, our conference will be all online. So I just wanted to share screen for one quick moment. No, you don't want to see my emails. There it is. That's what you want to see. So for anyone who hasn't been on our New Economy website before, if you are new to NENA, welcome and hello. NENA is a network of individuals and organisations who are working together to create an ecologically healthy and socially just society by transforming our economic system. Our website can be seen here, neweconomy.org.au, and we have lots of fun-filled ways for you to get involved with NENA. What I would like to mention is that we have got, actually tonight is a special night. It's our last webinar for the year. So hooray for the something like 20 webinars. I think it's actually closer to 30 that we've hosted this year, both nationally and from some of our local hubs. But all I wanted to point you to is right here there's a little button there for the annual conference, which starts next Friday, all online, nice and cheap, nice and easy to afford, but please do visit if you can, check out the program. We've got some wonderful First Nations speakers and people from all across sectors of our society talking about really positive projects, solutions, new initiatives. And even though it's not the same as coming together in person, it's still a terrific way to find out what everyone is up to and to learn more. And the only other thing I wanted to give a little plug to inside our NENA world is this wonderful initiative, the co-creation of Australia's first civil society strategy for a new economy. If you go to this page, you'll find a couple of different ways to get involved. If you're already a NENA member, and perhaps if you're already part of a hub, we invite you to connect through our templates. But if you're just an ordinary human being who's met NENA and would like to share your thoughts, please think about responding to our survey, kindly created by Steve, who's going to be one of our speakers tonight. And I do need to update the dates. We've pushed it back to get anyone's ideas in by next week. So that is about all I wanted to share, other than to admire our beautiful website. And if you are new to NENA, please do have a read about the way we work. We've got all these wonderful sectoral hubs and some geographic hubs, allowing people to have a nice landing space to come into NENA through shared interests and then to explore and get involved and to lead on initiatives however people would like to do so. So I think that's about it from me. Katherine, if you would like to unmute, I can hand over and let you take it from here. So I'll be in the background helping. Oh, and Katherine's going to mention any questions tonight that you have for any speakers, please pop them in the chat and I'll keep an eye on them and collate them in the background for you. So are you all good to go, Katherine?
Yes, welcome everybody. I'm Katherine Van Wilkenberg, and this is my second Arts and Culture Hub meeting. This is going to be in the format of a Q&A. But before we start our Q&A, I just want to acknowledge the country that I'm living on, which is I'm living in Gunai country in Tambo Bluff, East Gippsland. I acknowledge the Gunai traditional owners for their maintenance of this land that I'm privileged to live with. I acknowledged all emerging and future First Nations elders caring for this wonderful country. And I'm going to ask you all now, before we start, to mute your microphones so that the speakers can be heard clearly. Okay, good. So welcome to this, what is the state of the art in the new economy? I just want to say how we're going to proceed. So today we'll be showcasing some arts projects developed by creatives who are already in the audience here across sectors. One of the things we want to do in the Arts and Culture Hub is actually talk to each other about what we're doing, rather than talking about principles and abstract ideas. So each person in this program will speak individually, and after each speaker, we'll throw the floor open for questions. So please, during each person's chat, please write the questions in the chat, and Michelle is going to collate them, and we will be able to go forward with the chat after each person. If there's any time left, at the end, we'll ask more general questions to the whole, all the panelists. So let me introduce our first speaker, who is, and she will share her own slides. Nilmini de Silva, who I met during a joint artist in residency here at Float in Lake Tyers in East Gippsland, and also during the NENA conference at Lake Tyers. And Nilmini is both an engineer and photographer, and she will be talking about the role of the arts in a water-sensitive city. Over to you, Nilmini.
Thanks, Katherine. Can you guys see the slides now? Yes? Yeah,
Yes,
okay, cool. So as Katherine said, I'm a civil engineer, in particular a water engineer. And last time at the Hub, I spoke about some of the work that I'm doing currently with my photography. But Katherine asked me today to speak about my work in local government and how we integrated art into the water projects that we were doing there. I worked in a Western Sydney council, Fairfield City to be specific, for about 14 years in many different roles, ending up as a natural systems manager there, responsible for catchment management, so flooding, stormwater, biodiversity, all of that. Just to give some context for those of you who are not from Sydney, Western Sydney is a place where there's not a lot of bushland. It's quite hot. And so when we think about developing the catchment, we have to really think about it in terms of what the climate and environment is going to be in the future. I live in Hornsby, which is in the north of Sydney, quite a different place with lots of bush and all of that. So the work that we did there was very much about changing the environment to mitigate and adapt for the flood risk and the stormwater flooding that we experienced a lot of. And in many of the projects that we did, we used art for community engagement, to introduce people to nature, enable them to connect with nature a little bit more, because many of the people who live in Western Sydney are recent migrants and have come from a very urbanized environment. So it was really important to create that connection with nature, but also to use art as an aesthetic. I want to just very quickly, I put this slide up. I'm not going to get into any of the technical detail, but just to let you know that from about the 1800s, when Europeans first came here, we very much thought only about getting clean water to the places where we lived. Then we started, after the war, we started building up the cities, and we wanted to get water away from our houses. We thought of, the great Australian dream. We wanted clean landscapes. And in the 60s and 70s, a lot of our natural creek systems started getting piped and becoming concrete channels. And then with a change in awareness, people started to realize that we needed to think about water quality, and we needed to actually make sure that the floodplain was integrated with the creek system. And so we traveled over time into what we call the water cycle city, where we started to realize there were limits on our natural resources, to a water sensitive city, where we started to design with less concrete, enabling the water to infiltrate into our cities and all of that. So that's the context in which in which these projects are set. And one of the big projects that came about, it was actually a vision of the Australian Conservation Foundation, where they had this dream of seeing Sydney as an interconnected network of blue and green, where animals and people could move through these waterways. And the Restoring the Waters project was the first such project. So a lot of councils were putting projects up to be part of demonstrating this vision. And Restoring the Waters was chosen from Fairfield City Council. It was the first time in Australia that such a big project was done, where a concrete channel was deconstructed and made into a living stream. It was at the beginning, when community consultations started, the people who lived along that stretch of the creek were quite nervous. They didn't know what this might entail. They thought that if you deconstructed the channel, it might have increased flooding for them. People might start dumping in the creeks. And the first consultation, I wasn't at council then, this was in the early 90s, was quite disruptive. But then council took the people on a bit of a bus tour to show what other councils were doing in terms of the natural landscape. And we engaged some some artists. So this project was actually led by the landscape architect who worked with ACF. But there were some very well-known community artists who were involved in the project. And we constructed this memory line project, where some rye grass was sown. You can see in the bottom left slide there that they tried with this memory line project to evoke a sense of what had been before the concrete channel went in. So there had been a natural creek here previously. And there was lots of consultation where about 500 school kids were engaged in a water festival, where they were making cutouts of the little creatures that used to live in the creek. They were strung around the creek, they painted murals on the creek. And slowly a lot of the people came around and started to appreciate the project. And on the bottom right corner, you can see what the creek looks like now, from a concrete channel to a living stream. And the fish came back, people started to engage with the creek, people's property values went up because all of a sudden the whole amenity of the area changed. And so it was a fantastic a win for council. So, I'm going to move on, but there's so much to say about that project. Council actually won an international award amongst other awards for that project. So learning from that, Stockdale Reserve was the first project that I did when I started work there. I worked at Fairfield for 14 years, but this is the very first one, which we started when I joined in 99. There was an eroded creek system here, and we were trying to make improvements in the landscape to make it a more pleasant place. There was this, so this is in a place called Abbotsbury. There was some shops adjacent to the space, which weren't being patronized. So we tried to sort of integrate the shops with this landscape. And because of some of the initial mistrust that had happened with the other project, we made sure that people were involved right from the start. So we did a co-design process where we took a blank slate to the first consultation and started to talk to people about this project. And you can see some of the artwork that was developed that is now on the railing of the upstream pond there. People were really kind of taken through the consultation process by telling them what sort of creatures might live in a restored creek, and then asked to imagine how this could be part of a landscape. And one of the big things that happened here, so we had to do a lot of cut, so there was a lot of excavation that had to be done. And one of the big costs often in an engineering project is having to take the fill and dump it somewhere else. And what we did was actually, the landscape was crafted in such a way that some of the creatures that lived in the creek system were sort of sculpted into the landscape. And then we used signage to let people know what was happening here. So you can see that art is always a big part of the consultation. It's about raising awareness, but then the signage and stuff that is developed later becomes a continuation of that information process. So people can understand what is happening here through the signage and through the art. This is another example of signage. So as I said before, Fairfield floods often, but people don't like having lots of signs in their face about flooding because they think that it might impact their property values and whatever. But the people who actually experience a flood have a lot of healing to do. And this arts project was, each of those little water droplets has a message from a person who was involved in the flooding. And on that icon, which has been embedded in the landscape, you can see how far the water got in some of the critical floods. So the signage is kind of embedded in the landscape, but it was a reflection for the people who experienced the flooding, but it's information for the people who come after to say this is flood-prone land. It's a good idea to be aware of it. And so, yeah, I wasn't going to share too much more, but you can see this is a detention basin. So this is the kind of work that I was involved in. We had to come up with lots of ways to slow flooding down, and building detention basins that would hold the water back and then release it slowly was one of the ways that we managed the extreme floods that we faced in Western Sydney. But there was always an arts component, and in some cases, as you can see, that has been embedded into the dam, into the detention basin wall there. So that's, yeah, that's a little bit of what I wanted to share about the work that I was doing at Fairfield. I'll stop sharing now.
That's fantastic, Nilmini. You've really given us a great foundation for multidisciplinary, cross-sectoral thinking, which is really the basis of this webinar. And I'm particularly interested because I'm involved in the Moonee Ponds Creek revitalisation in Melbourne, and it's great because I've used restoring the water as an example, and people go, "Oh yeah, we get it." So that's really fantastic. I don't know whether anyone else has got a question, but I'll start off.
Well, Katherine, we've got a here in the chat.
Go on.
Yeah, is that what you wanted? You wanted them in the chat, didn't you?
Yeah, go.
Cool. All right. So Melinda has asked, apart from the school kids, how did you find and engage with the artists? And Neil, can I just,
with the artists?
If you move your hands around on the doobie, on your headphones, it crackles. We can't hear you. So just don't touch it.
Okay, good. So Restoring the Waters was done before I started, but I'll talk about Stockdale Reserve, which was the second project. So the artists are consultants to council. On Stockdale, I was the project manager, and I would work closely with the artists who were consultants to us. We would go to the local schools, and the art component would be very much part of how we did the consultation. So there's different levels of consultation, from just giving people information to empowering them. And what we were trying to do was empower people, so they had a sense of ownership in the project right from the beginning, and they felt like they could have some input. Now, often they would ask for things that we couldn't provide, and we would say, look, we can't put a barbecue in every single park, but there's the Western Sydney National Park just around the corner, and maybe you could use that. So it wasn't always about giving people what they wanted, but hearing them and letting them know why we couldn't provide some of the facilities that they were asking for example. Yeah.
Thanks, Nil. Nil, were you answering the question about how to engage with artists, or did you read the question further down?
She answered both, really.
Well,
okay,
yeah, like
sure.
yeah.
Okay.
So did the local resident, sorry, should I read the questions and answer them?
No,
or do you
I
want
to you. I just wasn't sure if you were running through them yourself, which is fine. About the only other question here is, how much of the artists' conceptualizing was captured in the project?
So with Stockdale, we got a whole book of lots of different things. We couldn't implement all of that because often you have a limited budget. So I remember very clearly one of them was, what about people who couldn't see, or who maybe couldn't see the artwork, and they wanted to have a sculpture that would sort of make sound with the wind. And that was something that we couldn't construct. So not everything can be constructed, and that goes for the hard engineering works as well as the artworks. It's often a staged process, and then you get a second grant, or there's extra money in a different financial year, and you can do the second part of it. But yeah, the primary goal, of course, is to manage the stormwater quantity and quality, and then to convey some of that to the people in the community.
Thanks.
And to give them a beautiful space where they can connect with nature. Yeah.
I just want to read two lovely comments for you now, which you've probably seen, but Kelly has said, wow, I'm so inspired, Nilmini. Thank you so much for sharing this hopeful story. Those before and after photos of the flowing waterways tell such a story of abundance and success. And it's a great example of how art and culture can bridge that gap to engage people into projects of regeneration. I couldn't agree more. Wonderful. And Bronwyn has said, I love the flood communication. It's like a memorial.
Yeah, so that came after we had a competition for artists. And so several artists in the local community put ideas, and then that was the one that was chosen. I don't want to burst your bubble, but I'll tell you a little story. That was the first part of 5 sections that we had to do in that creek. We did the first one, it was really successful. When we did the second one, the community was completely on board, but council decided they didn't want to do it at the time that we pitched it, just because it would take all of the money in the stormwater budget to do the second stage. So doing a creek restoration like that on half a kilometer of creek takes about $1.5 to $2 million. And so if that is your total stormwater budget, often councillors want to see that money spent around the catchment rather than fixing one creek system. Even though fixing an upstream creek system can help, it has multiple benefits downstream, it's sometimes very hard to convey how important it is to fix the concrete channels. And so they would prefer to see lots of little projects than one project. And so sometimes communicating this becomes a struggle, even though you've had so much success.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Nilmini. Can you? I just want to ask people to, if they want to have a copy of your slides, are you able to send people a copy of your images? Okay, so
yes, I can send it to Rhiannon and she could distribute it. Yeah.
Yes, fantastic.
We can also put them on the Arts and Culture Hub.
Yes, please.
On
that
the
would
website.
be great. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you guys send them to me, Rhiannon and I will get them up onto the website.
Okay. Yep.
So that's just a wonderful example which sets the foundation really for our next speaker, where we're really talking about de-siloing, and you really gave fantastic examples of our engineers working with artists, working with flood mitigators, working with social scientists, etc., people designing these projects. And I think what we need to be on about in the Arts and Culture Hub is what are the structures that we need to start to create to actually de-silo these institutionalized ways of thinking. So I just want to introduce our next speaker, who is the man sitting on your right, Stephen Liaros, who Nilmini and Stephen have been traveling around in a mobile home for 4 years, mobilizing
5
cultural circular economy villages. And so my interest from your perspective, Stephen, is, can you talk about what your relationship to arts and culture is from this journey that you've had? Like, what's the role of the arts within a circular economy? A lot of us have read and know a bit about the circular economy, which is, beginning and end, taking responsibility, knowing how things come to a conclusion, risk, consequences, etc. Can you talk about what your experience of working with artists, or maybe also your view of what arts can contribute to the circular economy?
Yeah, thanks very much, Katherine. Okay, so before I get to the circular economy, which is a vision for a new economy, or the relationship between arts and economics, I have to start from where I start from, which was as a town planner, so thinking about cities. So you talk about how do we connect all of these different disciplines and think in systems. My journey started with a question, I guess, possibly because of my Greek heritage, perhaps, but I was actually thinking about the Renaissance period and Florence at that time, and wondering why there was this sudden, spontaneous flourishing of creativity at one point in time in Florence at the Renaissance. And as a Renaissance, which is a rebirth, it was a rebirth of ideas of classical Greece. So there was another point in time, in 500 BC or thereabouts in the classical period, when there was another spontaneous flourishing of creativity in a particular context, a particular city. And so I began to wonder what were the conditions in that environment that enabled or attracted that creativity to those particular places, Florence in the Renaissance and classical Athens. And so the first element of that is that what were the similarities is the question. And the first similarity is that they were both city-states within a broader network of basically independent city-states. So they were politically independent and self-governing. And in order to be self-governing, you also have to be relatively economically independent. By that, I don't mean there was no trading between them. It was a trading network of independent city-states, but there was a degree of economic and political and independence. So that's the first external factor that that would have made them, could have contributed to that creativity. But then the next question is, well, there were lots of city-states, and why was it those particular ones that drew in the creatives, if you like. And so the next idea is to think about, well, what was the internal structure of those cities that enabled that creativity? And in Athens at the time, there had been developing this idea of a separation between the economic domain and the political domain. So the society was effectively divided into the household, which was the woman's domain, and the political domain, which was the male domain. And so women and slaves did all the work, while men were free to do philosophy, art, theatre, you know, all of their creative pursuits. So this notion of deliberately separating the women into the economic domain. So economy is actually management of the household, is the literal translation. So the management of the household by women enabled the head of the household to be free to move into the public or political domain, as they called it. So, so art came out of this separation between economics and freedom to do whatever you like, right? And so the separation was created by forcing certain people to do all of the work, while other people were free to do whatever they liked. So that's one way in which you can create a separation between the economic domain and the artist domain. Another way that actually emerged at the same time was if you think about the words Spartan, laconic, the idea of minimalism. So you do as little work as possible so that you have as much time as, you know, for creative pursuits, for relationships, for, you know, the more human activities. So the contest really between Athens and Sparta was the contest between the maximalists versus the minimalists, if you like. And so that's two different ways in which you can separate or create a domain of art and creativity. One is to shift all the work onto a certain group of people. Another way is to minimize the total amount of work that you're doing so that there's plenty of time for those creative pursuits. And you can see that also in the indigenous way of living, which was, you know, let's collaborate to do the hunting and or collection of food, and put little effort into building structures so that there's lots of time for ceremony, for art and other things. So and play, of course. So it's kind of a way of thinking about that separation between those two domains. The third way of doing it is to work collectively to deliver those basic necessities as efficiently as possible so that everyone has time and space for creativity. And I guess that's the way that we're approaching the circular economy, as a way of thinking of places or designing places where you can integrate a renewable energy microgrid that delivers all your energy efficiently. You can use that energy to power a water microgrid that would deliver your water and enhance your water systems efficiently. And with more water, you can grow more food. So, so if you're designing places to deliver your food, water, and energy, as well as your shelter, as efficiently as possible for everyone in a local economy, then everyone then has time and space to pursue their own individual interests or passions, or just play and relax, and or to do the creative, artistic activities. So it's that, so art, in my view, comes out of the freedom from the economy. So a new economy should be one in which we learn from the lessons of history and don't repeat the kind of that classical Greek idea of shifting all the work onto certain groups in the society. And at that time it was women and slaves. Today it's people in debt are trapped by having to continually do work. And so the 1% are free to do whatever they like. So it's how do we think about that relationship between the work that we need to do in order to sustain and maintain ourselves. How big is the built environment? Like how much work is involved in building and maintaining it? Because that influences the more things we build, the more things we have to maintain. And so that minimalist idea, is, one way of keeping that ongoing labor of maintaining it as small as possible. So I could just maybe leave it at that and just sort of summarize by saying the art, space and time for doing art is directly related to how much space and time we allocate to maintaining our basic necessities, and how we organize that collectively in our society.
Thank you. So can you just, my thinking as an artist is that in the neoliberal kind of version of the economy, which of course has developed since the 50s, the arts is very much an afterthought. Like the real business of life is buildings, infrastructure, development, expansion, extraction. All right. So we know that the circular economy is, moving away from that because of, we need to be more conscious of the consequences of our environmental actions. But my question to you is, the existing structure of the arts world and the distribution of government funding, etc., is very much tied, of course, to the development of structures, of cultural halls of excellence. I'm just interested in if you've got any ideas or if anyone else has got any questions about the necessary shifting of emphasis of what creativity is when you're working in a small circular community. You've been traveling around Australia for 4 years. Tell me what you think about what's the role of the arts within a small community of 200 people that you're designing for?
The role of the arts. I think when you start defining things, like constructing a fence around an idea, it becomes what you define it, and it becomes that for everybody. The art should be our own individual expression of who we are. So it shouldn't be defined. It should be the natural expression of what you do in your spare time, in your free time, when you're free of the need to pay a mortgage or put food on the table or maintain the household or whatever it is. Once you've done those things, what would you do? How would you express yourself? And art should be that come naturally out of that freedom. And I guess that's how I see it. You want to?
I just wanted to say something. I think a lot of things, when I share my photography, for example, on Facebook, a lot of people tell me I'm not creative. And I discovered my photography only like a year ago, 10 years ago, when I took a break from engineering and I had a gap year. And I think that most people don't even know that they're creative, because when you are entrenched in a 40-hour work week and a commute on top of that, there is no time to discover your creativity. And so what Stephen is saying is that if we create places where we can reduce that entrapment, where your water and energy and food is sort of provided as part of where you're living, and perhaps you can reduce the need to work in the traditional economy, we can find time to discover who we are, and that comes out as an expression of our art. And for me, this has been something that has happened mostly in the last 10 years since I had a break from engineering.
I think that's fantastic. But I just be very briefly, because I think this is a huge, another webinar topic, is that I actually, as an artist, I come from the opposite perspective, in that an example is in my involvement in the Moonee Ponds Creek, where most of the people, and I'll talk more about this when I come to do my chat, most of the people I'm involved with are science-based engineers, water mitigation, data management. They're all science-based people, and they use words like, and I know artists all over the place hear this, I don't have a creative bone in my body, which is absolute nonsense, because they are highly creative people within their own discipline. Anyway, I won't ramble on, but I'm just saying that our definition of creativity and our understanding has to change through de-siloing, which is what Stephen's talking about. And I think this is an evolutionary process whereby we actually will, we're creative people fundamentally. Fundamentally, all humans are creative. It gets wiped out of them. That's, look, you only have to look at kids. Anyway, that's fantastic discussion. And I think it's time to move on to our next speaker.
There's a few questions.
Yeah. There are questions, please.
Yeah, I think Eva has her hand up. Yeah.
Go on.
Okay, so.
Can I pick up on that?
Yeah, okay, you go Eva first and then.
Go Eva.
I find that a very strange way of looking at things. I mean, surely one of the objects, and I mean, I'm not an artist, I'm a sociologist, and I have a deep suspicion of the concept of economy. Because I think what we really are trying to do is create community, and community can actually combine some of the things like providing food, providing various things for the community with the creative stuff. This idea of dividing it up, I mean, what you sound like is the sort of, homo economicus, the dead shit that's the basis of neoliberalism, that I'm going to go away and do my art as soon as I get some time for me. And I think that that's the wrong way of trying to look at it. I think we need to embed the creativity into areas like cooking, like all sorts of other things, and try and shift the paid labor and the hard stuff so it becomes a pleasant thing to do. So creativity becomes part of all our lives, not something we do when we've got time off and we've left the woman in the kitchen to do all the housework.
No,
I love that you said that, Eva.
That's the way it comes across. I think, we've got ways and means of creating a circular society where we embed the pleasures of doing things together with some of the more menial type things, so that we actually get a sense that these are, that one can be creative and one can do all sorts of things in all sorts of parts of creating the house, the environment, the various other things, not cut it into two. It doesn't have to be leisure-based.
It's look, I absolutely love that you said that, and I agree. I feel that if I was free, I'd be much more involved in agriculture and in growing food and creating soil and managing water.
What do you mean by free?
Okay. That's a really big question.
I know, but that's the point I think I'm cavilling at, that, we have the
he's writing his PhD at the moment, so.
Yeah,
yes, I couldn't stand the footnotes. But I think that's that's a conceptual problem, because freedom surely is the freedom to do most of what you're doing with a level of pleasure in it, and to build the creativity into a lot of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be something where you have to escape things in order to be creative.
Yeah.
Look, I totally agree with what you're saying. I guess what I was trying to emphasize is how we've created those divisions. And if we can reflect on how we created those divisions, we can maybe let them go. And yeah, look,
just add to that. I think part of the problem is that we monetize everything at the moment. Neoliberalism has turned everything into the fact that it's only the money thing that counts. And if we get away from that, we can create things because they give us pleasure, not because they've got a price on them. And I think once we remove that connection with the economy, so to speak, that we can actually create a circular society. I really don't like the term economy. I know it came from housework, but it's been totally misused ever since. You know, we need to get back to the idea that things have a value built into them, not necessarily that it's the financial value that ties us down, and therefore we have to escape it in order to be creative. I think that doesn't work.
There's some great points there. Can I just suggest, because we actually still have two other speakers, we might, there's a question here from Melinda. She said, very interesting and inspiring, Steve. What is one of the biggest obstacles or challenges you see to developing a circular economy communities?
Okay, so there are no techniques in terms of the available technology is all there. The main problem is in the cultural shift that is required. And that's where art can also come in telling the stories, because we live by stories. So what are the narratives of change? And so we've just set up a website earlier this year. We're still kind of developing it, but some of the narratives that we're looking at are kind of the shift from a linear to a circular worldview. So linear, endless economic growth to thinking in cycles. A shift from extractive to regenerative, a shift from centralized to distributed, a shift from ownership to stewardship. So all of those narratives are part of the things that we feel are necessary. And so I guess in many ways we've moved away from, we don't need to really think about the design. There's plenty of the available technology and the capabilities are all there in terms of architects and designers across lots of different disciplines, from water management to, you know, energy microgrids and the whole lot, in terms of shifting, you know, creating a different way in which we organize our built environment. Because one of the things that we really try and emphasize is that we shape our cities and thereafter they shape us. So we've shaped our cities over really 2,500 years, so that we're creating separation everywhere. Fences, borders, ownership, all sorts of separations, us and the others, you know, so there's the divisions and silos we've created in our minds are the structures that we've translated into the physical world. So the way we think in silos has been translated into the physical world. So if we can create an environment in which there is no separation between people, not to say that people shouldn't have their own private spaces and, you know, other spaces for sharing. I'm not talking about a commune and communal living, but I'm talking about understanding that we share certain infrastructure, we share an environment, a landscape with other species as well. So how do we create an environment that enables that sharing? And then that hopefully will reshape our own perception of the world. It won't be about, you know, my things and, you know, other things, because we have to collectively manage the food system. We have to collectively manage the energy and the water. And we have to be careful of what we put in it, because we know it's cycling back around to us. So that idea of we're all connected and we're connected with the land on which we live is essential it's not just can't be just an abstract thing. It has to be physically embedded and translated into the way we build the places that we live. I don't want to use cities because, you know, cities has this meaning of the big, you know, Sydney, Melbourne, whatever, but any human settlement of whatever scale, and also the connections between settlements. So thinking about a pattern or a network of settlements, and also not just being settled. What about the nomads, people who don't want to be anchored to one place and one job for all of their life? If you want to be a nomad, and that's what we were trying to do by living in a motorhome for 5 years, actually. We were trying to understand what are the limitations, like the internet enables us to be anywhere while we're working. And so what would be the limitations or the possibilities of being a nomad in a world that's constructed just for settlers? So, and it was, you know, the nomads that we met that were really fascinating. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I think
Right.
I've taken too
Thank
much
you.
time.
Yeah. I'm going to have to move on because we've got 2 more speakers and then hopefully more questions. I think that there are really some very important questions in terms of how we're designing and for regeneration, which brings me to our next speaker, Matt Sykes, who was trained as an architect. He did a landscape architecture at Melbourne University, and his direction in career and life and creativity has shifted somewhat in a very interesting way. So he did a degree at Cambridge, a graduate diploma in entrepreneurship, and also he's done Certificate 3 in tour guiding. So here is a very adventurous, possibly nomadic man. And I'm going to call on you, Matt, to talk about your new business, Regenerative Projects, which is, I just want to, how did you get to where you are now in terms of being trained as an architect? What influenced you? What were your main shifts?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Katherine. And I'm loving the threads. I'm just kind of listening in, and I can kind of get a sense of the mind map that you've woven and bringing all of these different stories and perspectives together. So it's, yeah, it's just really lovely to tune in. Just before I jump in, I'd also like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung and Gunai communities, which are connected to West Gippsland, which is where I am now, having escaped the Melbourne bubble for the first time in 6+ months. So the question that you ask is a really interesting one. It actually has a link to a moment when I was studying landscape architecture at Melbourne Uni, and there was one subject that I was doing called landscape heritage, where we were being asked to kind of look at those threads that are embedded in the landscape, and we were being presented with a very strong European focus. But then I started to ask questions about what else is hidden. So I'm in Warragul, Katherine, is where I'm based at the moment. So then the following year, there was a subject that I took on called the Designing the Sustainable Landscape. And all of my friends started gravitating towards these Western concepts around sustainability. And I said, I'm not really sure that's it. I just feel like there's something else. And so that's where I started to look into First Nations knowledge and connections with country. And that opened up a whole other path of learning. So within that year, I went up to Broome and walked the Lurujari Dreaming Trail with the Galarabaloo community there. Shortly after, I went up to the Gama Festival in Arnhem Land to connect with the Yolngu community, and all the while connecting with you know, people within the Kulin Nation around Melbourne as well. So yeah, you know, I started off with this interface around, you know, design and creativity and nature and how you can bridge. And it took me a little while to realize that maybe business was actually a more culturally apt vehicle for facilitating some of this cultural shift that we're talking about. And I know that a lot of, you know, my generation feels very much the same way. So what I'm going to do is share a couple of stories of some of the work that's emerged out of COVID, because literally I have started this business in the first lockdown. It was an emergent thing. So just as, you know, a fire comes through and the new wave of growth comes with it, that is the case for me through COVID. So I guess I've been on a journey around sustainability for many, many years. And I kind of got to a point where just really started feeling just kind of over it with the whole guilt thing around sustainability, because it was just this, the narrative is basically that humans are inherently bad and that all we can do is create less harm, which I think is a dreadful narrative and not very inspiring. So you kind of start looking for an alternative. And by listening to, you know, some of those voices that are closely connected to the earth, you start learning about these ideas of regeneration, which are, of course, inherent in Australia's landscape. And you see that with fire ecology, but you know, it's a universal thing. So I started a business to be able to, you know, facilitate these shifts. And you can get a sense here with some of these pillars that we work within, and engaged currently with projects both internationally and throughout Australia as well. So these are some of the pillars. So it's nature. It's not just about, you know, managing or preserving, protecting ecosystems. Actually about restoration and, you know, building diversity. Community, we're not saying, oh, let's just be healthy or let's try and avoid being sick. We're saying, you know, let's actually go towards striving for happiness and that the mental well-being as well, which we've all become so tuned into. Circular bioregional economy, of course, we're talking about this, culture, diversity, all of these interfaces that can become drivers of innovation and waves of change, a renaissance, if you like. And then, of course, education through storytelling, advocacy, because, you know, we are moved by the heart as much as the mind and the hand. So I'm going to share a story which is literally just in the last 24 hours, but it's a prelude to this next project that I want to share about. So I escaped the bubble where I was based down in Mornington through COVID, and I consider myself very lucky to have been in that bubble, considering, you know, many people around the world that are still doing it incredibly tough. But I was able to escape and caught up with a friend in Melbourne. He is a young architect called James Margovin, and he's super passionate about saunas. And so his COVID project was to create a sauna in his own backyard in inner Melbourne. And that's what he did. And so last night we didn't christen it because he's already been in there, but it was the first time that I got to experience it with him. So beautifully designed, all made out of recycled materials. But we went on this experience. So we were playing around with eucalypt leaves and doing the whisking, which is beautiful for your circulation. We were playing around with oils. We were, you know, he had a bath in his backyard as well. So we're doing all this ritual, this art of bathing stuff. And then what's beautiful, and it relates to some of the threads, is that once you start to enter that space of relaxation and state of well-being, the creativity and openness of mind starts to open up. And so through water being that common connector, it opens up these pathways of regeneration within ourselves, but also that closeness of a connection with our environment and community. And so Katherine, you know, where we first met was down at, you know, in East Gippsland on the float project at Lake Tyers there. And what I'm about to show next is a bridge into that. So I'll just drop a link into the chat here, which can give you a little bit of information. But this is a project that I was working last year at Peninsula Hot Springs over the last couple of years, and was fortunate to receive a fellowship through the Victorian Tourism Industry Council. The concept is for a 900-kilometre Great Victorian bathing trail, which would stretch right across the southern coastline, linking hot springs, sea bars, mineral bars, beaches, as well as all kinds of other wellbeing experiences such as walks, farm experiences, you know, arts, cultural centres, all of those things that promote that holistic well-being. Now, I'm not going to, dwell on this too much because I just want to give a little bit of taster, but this is a project that I guess is emerging as a potential pathway for regeneration across all of those pillars. So, of course, tourism got a big kick in the guts during this time, so we need to get that going. But the way that we do it, and through a regenerative approach is so critical. So there's 2 hot springs at the moment, one in Warrnambool, one on the Mornington Peninsula. And the opportunities to start to create itineraries and pathways and experiences is something we can do now. But, by 2030, we could end up with all of these hot springs right across our coastline, over a dozen potentially, and then this beautiful string of baths around Port Phillip Bay, Nirm there as well, even up to having a swimmable Birrarung along the Yarra River. Now, on touching on that, 2021 marks the beginning of the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. And of course, the way that we have been approaching conservation in the past has been in this siloed approach that, is very much separate from business and other things. So I guess the question is, how do you actually form or facilitate the re-emergence of a way of business that is in partnership with our earth, rather than seeing it as the extractive approach that's really only existed for a short time. So one of the little seeds, again, that's come out of this time is a concept called the Melbourne Regeneration Roundtable. And so that's a group of really progressive business leaders. Some of them are B Corps. Some examples that were part of the first event. We had Small Giants, we had Yarra Pools, which is a proposal for a swimmable river. We had Sustainability Victoria, a whole suite of others, B Lab itself. But really it's coming together and saying, okay, well, let's start from that nature-based approach and one of the key ideas, and there'll be an event in January looking at this, but if by 2030 or even maybe before it, we want to have a floating sauna, like, James and I did last night. We had a sauna in the backyard, but let's say we want to have a floating sauna on Birrarung. What does it take to get there? And it takes so many different elements, so many different stakeholders, some beautiful storytelling and art and cultural leadership as well. But how can business be a driver for that change? So these are the kind of questions and ideas that that we've been exploring through regeneration projects, and looking forward through next year to all of those other new shoots and collaborations that are going to emerge as well. So there's a taster, and look forward to listening to some more questions and also other thoughts through the rest of the discussion. So I'm going to stop that.
Fantastic. I just want to drop an ad in before there's any more questions, Michelle. Here that Matt has agreed to will shape the next Arts and Culture Hub webinar based on whether it'll be Meetung or Warrnambool or Hot Springs, and the kind of opportunities for artists that we can start to create, collaborations, linking business, linking various art forms. And we've had many people on the previous Arts and Culture Hub who were in the healing arts. So we're really talking about a cross-sectoral approach to artistic and creative development. So I think this is a really exciting possibility, Matt, and I'm very excited to have you as part of this whole process, and looking forward to working with you.
It's fantastic. Can I just say, I'm getting jealous of all the discussions about the things you guys are all doing in Melbourne and Victoria. So let's make sure that we can stimulate equivalent excitement and activities in Queensland, where I am. So I shall be chatting with all of you about such things. Katherine, I don't see I don't see any questions myself, but I was just going to ask a quick question to Matt, which is, by setting up a business consultancy, you're obviously making some kind of income out of this, which I find miraculous, that you're able to build an interest amongst others in the regenerative side of stuff and the art side and still get paying clients. What kind of projects are filling up your days in the work that you do? Yeah,
look, it's a really good question, and I guess I can sum it up by saying that there's two key sections. So there's and you know, it is generational to a degree. So you've kind of had a generation of, let's say, Gen X pioneers that have, you know, eco pioneers, let's call them, that have been working in the conservation space or through ecotourism, these types of spheres. So examples of projects, I've been working a lot with the international ranger community. So they're needing to, you know, basically rebrand what they're doing to take them out of that pure conservation space, because what we're seeing is those overlaps with, public health and economy and so on. So the International Ranger Federation, Thin Green Lime Foundation, which is locally based, and a Ranger Round Table, which is an international forum between rangers and global conservation organisations. So that's at that level. Doing a lot of work with some Indigenous elders. So Boomerang Elder Auntie Carolyn Briggs in Melbourne, looking at a cross-cultural education project, some AR experiences in there as well, related to tourism. And then one of the key areas is this, you know, Gen Y entrepreneurs. So really purpose-driven, and that, you know, they're actually, from the beginning, they're starting businesses, and they're mostly startups, or that, you know, within 12, 18 months of going. But from the beginning, they want to push beyond sustainability, but they need frameworks and tools around this. So I guess what I've been able to distill through experiences locally, but also internationally, is to bring these tools and make them accessible, so that actually creates tangible, you know, we do a regenerative coaching process, which takes them through these pillars and allows them to work on how to identify, measure, and communicate the impacts of what they're doing in these different areas. So some of it's strategy, a lot of it's strategy, some of it's project based, and a strong area as well is this formation of partnerships and alliances that are bringing together these, you know, cross-sector collaborations, and the Great Victorian Bathing Trail Alliance is a good example of that.
Fantastic. Any more questions? Otherwise, I think it's really timely for me to
May I ask a question?
Yeah, quick response to that one. The answer is yes. I'm having a conversation with Tourism Australia next week to try and work out how the bathing culture and the bathing narrative and well-being narrative can be woven together in it as, you know, I guess an Australian network of bathing trails. So I've done some work with Charles Davidson, who's the co-founder of Peninsula Hot Springs, scoping potential for an outback hot springs trail in northern New South Wales and southern Queensland, Western Australia as well. But you know, there's water everywhere. It's depending whether it's, you know, hot and cold, or just cold, or just hot. But absolutely, it's looking at that whole Australia level.
Might just pop in this last question from Melinda. I guess the plan is for upscaling to other states. Other states also have natural hot springs. However, the springs are everyone's resources. So how do you plan to deal with not over controlling it? For example, is there a space for people to access the springs without having to access the baths? Good question.
Good.
So it depends on each place. So in Victoria, the geothermal aquifer is around 600 meters below the surface. So in order to access that water, you know, project teams are having to spend between $1 and $2 million to access the water. So, you know, by that point, you know, that means that you need a whole business model in order to sustain and you know, and create a sustaining system, because you've got to be able to bring the water up, but then re-inject it back down. In other places in Australia, it will come up naturally. And so that's a different setup. But I guess it's just having that diversity of experiences, which is important. So I guess it depends on the resource itself, and the resource then influences the business models and the different types of access. But I guess when you compare it, you know, bathing to other luxuries, it is an affordable luxury in many senses. But, you know, connection with water is something that we can all do. So, you know, of course it's a challenge, but I think, you know, opportunity for a lot of diversity of experiences.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Over to you, Katherine.
Okay, I'll move on. I'm the final speaker, and what's so fascinating to me about all the previous speakers is about how we're learning to think in far more in systems thinking. So we're breaking down the silos, and we're developing connections and cross-sectoral relationships that within if you like, I don't like using the word classic, but you know, in the way we grew up, you were very siloed and you had to work like this, and you were very contained and framed. So I want to just share my screen, which is, hold on a minute. Here we go. Where's my screen? Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. And I'm just going to get there. View, show slides. Here we go. Well done. I'm such a success. Okay. I joined the Moonee Ponds Creek collaboration because I had worked on this project that you can see the slide of, which is an eastern barred bandicoot in the endangered grasslands of the Western Victorian plains, volcanic plains. And I worked there for about 10 to 15 years because for me as a POM, an ex-POM, actually connecting through local species and connecting to the land meant that I understood much more the history and the interconnection or the disconnection between white settlers. You know, human hovel passed through this land, for example, and John Batman and John held a wedge, etc. Anyway, we developed this artwork, which is going to be every 2 years. This is really a weed eradication project that then becomes transplanted with endangered wildflowers. This is all Pimelia spinescens and Chrysocephalum apiculatum. I'm trying to show my brilliance by knowing all these indigenous local species. So anyway, this artwork became the basis of me wanting to join the Moonee Ponds collaboration. A friend of mine who was a forester and ecologist, his bucket list was to actually complete the revegetation of the Moonee Ponds Creek. So I said, oh, come on, let's do it. So he happened to know Julie Francis. You mentioned alliances, Matt. So he happened to know Julie Francis in Melbourne Water, and they were actually wanting to set up this collaboration because they really wanted to resolve the siloed, you know, disconnection between government agencies, between local environment organisations, schools, etc., etc. So I joined this collaboration in 2016. And as I said before, can you just, I'll go on to the next slide. Wrong one, hold on, this is gone. Why is it jumping? There we go, why is it jumping? Shouldn't jump. Sorry, everybody.
Katherine, you might need to open the document up again, and because are you trying to get to a third slide?
Here we go. It's here.
Okay.
So this is the second. So as I said before, most of the people in this, well, in fact, all of them except me, I was the only artist. So most of the people were science trained. Their attitude towards art was, let's get a good mural happening, because it's a wonderful way to portray fauna and flora. And so my position as an artist, because of the way I've been working for many years in community, is that I actually want to be involved in the design process from the very beginning of the process. Most art is plonked onto the end as decoration. And that's not certainly my understanding or experience and the value of arts working in a collaborative context. So I worked with Mandy Nicholson, who is a Wurundjeri artist, to develop this EcoArts toolkit, basically to work with all the existing working groups within the collaboration. These people like, you know, data mapping, trails, tracks and connectivity, the governance group, that, you know, various other groups. So our intention was to create this toolkit for creating collaboratively in habitat renewal, to experience cultural heritage sharing by Wurundjeri and Bunurong artists and storytellers, to connect with diverse cultural communities in gathering spaces, and to facilitate outdoor education experiences. That was our intention of developing this kit. So I showed you that picture at the beginning, which is the overview of this Eastern Barred Bandicoot, which was called part of an artwork called Marsupial Masterpieces. So I used this as the main image in the toolkit. So I took these images, and this is just one of 6 other images in the toolkit of various artworks. So the artworks cross theatre, music, sculpture, all sorts of things. But the difference between in my view, the dominant public art perspective is that the art perspective is about art for art's sake. It's not about repair and maintenance of ecosystems. And that was our focus on this, because it was about connecting to the land and repair and maintaining, which is the definition of EcoArt, these particular habitats. So I took a tonal drop out of that photo. And so during meetings and during workshops, people join these dots while they, this is it, while they consider and work through this process. And the process is to actually cross the disciplines to talk about community engagement. How would you set up a theatre performance in this site? What would this site be great for? Would it be a great child's place? Would it be a great Indigenous astronomy site? Was it a cultural astronomy site? So we're crossing disciplines, and you're using and working with local residents to come up with these questions at the beginning of the project, not at the end. So I've been working with groups, the Trails, Tracks and Connectivity, and we've been talking about litter management, seating, digital interactive signage, all these, and Nilmini was mentioning this in the projects that she was talking about. So these processes need to be happening at the beginning of design projects to bring in artists rather than at the end. And of course, the major thing is, how will this project connect with other projects along the catchment? So we're really interested in a whole systems view, the whole catchment as a whole systems, rather than individual isolated little projects, which is where the arts are generally funded. Individual little projects that aren't really related to the whole big picture. And this is what I was really trying to circumvent, and it's working. So we are now we're involved in several of sites along the Moonee Ponds Creek. We're going to, early days, but we're going to be involved in capital works like bridges, trails, tracks and connectivity, litter management. They want to actually develop litter traps or further develop litter traps, and so forth. So it really is one of the solutions to working holistically. So that's it. That was the purpose of the EcoArts Toolkit. Now, of course, we go and run these programs. We'll run workshops, and we will then design and work with project initiatives and project concepts. All right, where am I now?
Thank you, Katherine. What are you doing to your screen?
I don't know. What am I doing? Help me.
I don't know. Do you know how to stop sharing? You go up to the red button up the top. Otherwise, I can take over and do it.
You might. Oh, stop share. Yes.
Hey, well done.
Thank you.
Whole new evolutionary stage.
So it's very exciting, and for me, it's like the fulfillment of many decades of work. And because of COVID and because of bushfires, these projects are happening everywhere. There's so much money around, you know, in terms of bushfire recovery and COVID recovery and all the rest of it. This is the opportunity for local governments and so on to get to really get some excellent holistic whole systems thinking projects happening.
Fantastic, well done. Do we have questions for Katherine with her work? I'm aware that the time is clicking past and people do grow a little weary after a long.
They do.
Yeah. Oh, here's a question from Linda. How do you persuade people to include art from the beginning and see it as part of the process rather than a product?
Thank you, Linda. Brilliant question. Number one, relationships. It all comes down to relationships and being willing to invest your time having cups of coffee, joining various groups, seeing where the opportunities. You really have to develop entrepreneurship skills. I think Matt was talking about this earlier. And so you only persuade people, in the end, people believe in you because of your track history, because of your capacity to conceptualize, because of your capacity to relate to people. It's all of those things that are really going to persuade people to include art from the beginning. It doesn't happen by putting in an art proposal. That's for sure. I hope that answers your question, Linda.
No. I think that's a great answer. Perhaps I can just put one question to, perhaps more to Katherine, Nil and Steve together, which is, we've had a couple of meetings and a couple of webinars from the NENA Arts and Culture Hub, which I, as one of the organisers of NENA, has found utterly delightful and really important. What do you guys see as the next couple of years that something like the New Economy Network can do to further these discussions and to build more, I guess, more serious engagement with arts at the front end of social change? What do you guys see as some kind of future path for the hub itself inside NENA?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll speak first, because
Please do.
I have written the objectives for the Cultural Hub, and I'm quite willing to send them to anyone. I think the first thing is to demonstrate, which is what we've done today, to demonstrate the importance and the centrality of arts and culture to design, to creative initiatives, to the repair and maintenance of ecosystems and so on. I think it has to be a project designer. I'm a bit zoomed out with talking about principles and wonderful ideas. I want to see the stuff on the ground. I'm proud to say I'm a phenomenologist. So I want to see projects happening, which is why I've asked Matt. I've asked Matt to head up this project for next year, which will be our first Q&A arts and culture webinar on, it's yet to be shaped, but opportunities that can be created through these, the bathing trails, whether it's at Meetang or whether it's at Warrnambool, that will all emerge. But I think it's actually through massaging and shaping, excuse the pun, massaging and shaping these concepts that we can present to artists that, look, you've actually got to think whole systems. The old world is, I think it's all over Red Rover. You're not going to get arts funding happening again. A lot of these institutions, which are based on neoliberal economics, which is bums on seats and creative industries, very much in terms of, small payments, etc. Not totally, I'm exaggerating, but bear in mind my drift, is that, we are the creators. We cannot any longer rely on curators and managers to manage us. We have to take the initiative and say, we know about economics, we know about business management, we've studied it, we've worked for it, we know about time management, we know about spreadsheets. We have to take on a management role. So having said that, I think one of the major important things for NENA is to grow a mentorship structure. So that if we have a number of projects that people come forward and say, look, this is really exciting, because I'd like to keep talking about, what's happening for me down the track at the Moonee Ponds Creek project. There are things happening here in East Gippsland. My goal is, whether it's Queensland, hopefully everywhere, is that people come forward and say, look, I'm involved in this project. I would like to have some other artists' assistance. Can we find mentorship? Can you really question me and say, look, you've forgotten this? you really need to think about this. Or, wow, you know, I think that's a really important thing, is mentorship, show and tell, showcasing projects. There's more, but I think that will do for the moment.
No, but Katherine, thank you. And that's actually, I mean, as Bronwyn, I think, who's still on the call, can vouch for, the early days of even designing NENA since late 2016. It's always been about peer-to-peer sharing, support, showcasing, experimenting, collaborating. So perhaps give some thought to the actual nuts and bolts of how we encourage that to happen, whether you start with a mentoring program, whether you start with a list of people who are doing projects and are seeking, you know, the administrivia of actually making mentoring projects work is very important. How do you find each other? How do you make those relationships?
Well, and who's willing to give the time? And, you know, we all need to be paid for our work, blah, blah. You know, how do you manage that? Well, I'm making a call right now, put it on the web or get in touch with NENA. If you really have got, you know, an interest in fostering relationships with, you know, younger people, I think it's absolutely critical, because my major interest is a succession plan. I'm going to die soon.
Oh, no, not.
and I need, you know, Matt, I need you. No, you know, it's like, no, we have to invest in the next generation. And I think that has to be a priority.
Yeah.
There are too many old farts in important positions.
And thank you to Linda. She's saying, I need to go as it's morning here in the UK and I have a meeting.
Oh.
Thank you, Linda, for joining us.
Oh.
Hey, although maybe she's gone. Anyway, yeah, no, I love that. And Neil and Steve, did you have thoughts about, you know, the future of how the arts and culture space inside NENA can do wonderful things?
I guess I probably see art in a very different way. I see the idea of creating a new economy is a creative process in itself. That's what, it's an artistic, creative enterprise that we've entered into to create a new economy. And I think the idea that art is the expression of who we are or what we want to collectively achieve is, it makes art the kind of glue that binds all the other sort of disciplines together, and maybe is the way in which we shift from the silo thinking to systems thinking, as Katherine is saying. How do we make the process of creating a new economy an art project in itself? I don't know, that's just a thought maybe rather than a practical step.
And yeah, I mean, one way might be to try, I don't want to say this word, but to get funding for an exhibition where people all over Australia can, it could even be running concurrently in different states, where we can try to convey these ideas to a wider public through art. Like, I don't know, I see, you know, activism as very much a part of my art. And I find that if I put a photograph and say something about it with a sort of hidden message in it, I'll have a lot of engagement. Whereas if I put a Guardian article and say something, nobody wants to engage. And so I think art has a valuable place to play in terms of trying to convey the ideas that we are talking about, which are very complex, which kind of people find confronting, and we can use it to start conversations. So I think, like, we have to engage with a wider public, and I feel that's one way that perhaps we could do it.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this is really just the tip of the iceberg. But having been, you know, attempting for 30 years really to do exactly what you're saying, I'm not quite as hopeful that an exhibition is actually going to engage people in the way that you might be hoping that it might, because people who go to exhibitions, it tends to be quite passive. So I think there are very...
I've done it here in Hornsby, and through the exhibition, I've had opportunities to have artist talks, and I've done it a few times with Hornsby Council. And we have a festival of the arts here, so, and as well as bigger festivals like the Head On Photo Festival, which is a big festival in Sydney, but Hornsby Council works with one local artist. And so I've found inroads into the local council here.
Fantastic.
To do things
that
have been funded as well. Yeah.
Well, I think it's all possible, but I think it's about having a plan of how all the bits fit together, and how what you're doing can generate work in, you know, wherever. So I want to say thank you to everybody, and to really ask people to write their thoughts, and we will continue to develop this next webinar in January, I suspect, or maybe very early February.
February.
And
there
I
is
think
nothing happening
hopefully
in
that will
yeah.
in February, to get some kind of a mind map or a map of what these possibilities are, and the goal, of course, will be to use individual or various areas or various sites to develop these possibilities that people can connect with, and possibly generate them in their own area. Because I think one of the most important things is that we've been showing here is that it's all about localization, that you've got to work with your local community, with your local environment. You've got to build your alliances, you've got to build your networks, and Warrnambool is going to be totally different from Meetung, and totally different from Hornsby. And so I think it's about really working in community, arts and community development, arts and cultural development, building those relationships so that we can actually connect with the land, to develop to connect to land in our own backyards, and heal and revolutionize our, when I say our, I should say my Western perspective. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and I hope dearly that you will write to us and contact them, and hopefully Matt and I will get together shortly and shape something that we'll let you know about. But if you please have any more ideas, that's what we want. It's not about us, it's about, you know, Matt and I, it's about all of us putting in our pen, you know, sense worth, and working on actions and possibilities. So thank you, everybody. It's been great. And thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you to Melinda, who's sitting here with me, who's been helping me. Fantastic. I look forward to seeing and talking with you all soon.
But before we go anywhere, someone has asked a very important question. Irene said, what is the Arts and Culture Hub? I am going to point you to one web page there, which is the New Economy NENA hubs. And if you visit that and read about what we've done, is we've set up the New Economy Network as basically a distributed governance network. So lots of different hubs doing their own thing, but all within the support of the coordinating space of NENA and the vision and the principles of NENA. So I've sent you, so have a little peek at that, copy that out of the chat. And then just quickly, what I will do is when you go to our website, you'll see all the different hubs that are listed. And I'll show you the Arts and Culture Hub has its own little page. And over time, what these hubs are going to be is a landing place for people with interests in certain things. When they find NENA, they find a hub, they'll jump in, they'll see there are human beings to chat to, things to read, past webinars to watch, and future projects to develop. So there, I've popped in the chat again, the actual direct link to the Arts and Culture Hub. The hubs can be ephemeral or forever inside the NENA space. And we've got a participatory budget process that we're working on to make sure that over time, for example, if NENA is invited to partner into the development of projects or funding, we've got one of our hubs at the moment actively, busily writing a grant application. And if it's successful, it will actually bring a whole range of activities under the NENA banner and connected to another NGO and a university. So the hubs are all about making things happen and help
Yeah.
in the early days. So
yeah. So terrific. Thank you, everybody. And this recording, when will the recording be put up? Roughly?
well, my major IT support person is on holidays, but it should be up by early next week.
Good. So you can record and find, and if you want to get hold of anyone's slides before you switch off, Michelle, I would suggest that people look in the chat and send a message to whoever the speakers are if you would like a copy of their slides, and I'm sure the speakers will willingly send you their slides.
Or if they
Okay.
just send them to me, we can get them up on the website by Monday as well. So
Okay, good.
and for those in the know, send them to Rhiannon, because I'm grooming young Rhiannon to be our wonderful coordinating support, all volunteer led. So be patient with us if we're a few days behind.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Katherine.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to further contact with everybody. So just let me know. I've put my email address. If you want to chat to me and talk to me and you've got ideas, please do so. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, Matt, Neil, Steve, and everyone.
Thank you. And Matt, and we'll all be in touch. And it's been lovely meeting everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.